Pat, love the chair.
I am in an enormous chair.
You
Oh,
look you look like Thanos.
I was at my apartment. I go and get my iron gauntlet, and then
That would have been awesome.
That was
Hell,
totally by design.
Nathan, looking good. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hi, Morgan. Good morning. Thank you. What a
Hello, mate.
trooper.
It's
Morgan,
very
you're
early.
incredibly smart for 6 in the morning.
Thank you. Yes, I sleep like this. Yep.
Uh,
Hey, so are we? Is Zoom better for this? I might have missed the earlier chats. If you want to Zoom it,
I think we're all right with this. Is it okay
cool.
for you?
If you like.
Normally, I mean that's fine. My audio normally cuts in and out on Discord, but if it works for you guys, then it's no real issue by me.
It's coming all right. Are you guys seeing my camera?
I don't see a picture.
Yeah, that is annoying because it says the camera's on. Sometimes, I'll put it on and off again. 1 second. That sometimes fixes it.
That's a sweet ass chair, Pat. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, this is when I am at my fiance's place. I am relegated to doing all kinds of computer stuff in the bedroom, and this is the chair that happens to be in the corner of the bedroom. So this is where I play my TS games as well.
It's where the magic happens. I like it.
Well, well, Morgan, when you're the king of TTS MCP, you got to have the throne, man.
Yeah, baby. Yes, I like it.
Guys are looking great. All right. I'll just wait for Sploosh to get back, and we can get started. You guys are ready? Otherwise, I can hear everybody pretty good.
Other than I feel very underdressed.
That's okay. I figure I had to pump it up a little bit because I'm the host or moderator. But Morgan's looking sharp as always. You even got Vaughn to wear put a collar on that day.
Yeah, I mean, if you know Jaron well, that's pretty rare for him to wear a collar. Actually,
That's what I
don't-
figured.
I've seen him. I've seen him in a suit once when his brother got married, and that was it. Yeah. Hey, how's the Travis Esmond game going? Have you guys caught any of it?
Don't know.
A little bit. I've only been watching it for the last 20 minutes or so. It looks quite interesting. Have you watched any of it?
No, I literally woke up and then put this jacket
It's very-
on and then poured a cup of tea.
What is super interesting is they're playing 18 threat on hammers, gamma hammers, and it is 4 versus 6,
Oh, wow.
which is pretty. Yeah, so Esmond has gone 4 wide with Cabal versus Travis running 6 Wakandans. So it's a very unconventional game, and there's a lot of murder happening. But it looks like Esmond has had an incredible second turn and leapt ahead in points, as can always happen in Gamma, right? Like,
Yeah.
can have a good, easily come back. So we'll see what happens.
Sploosh, can you say a few things? Just make sure your levels are good. That mic is amazing.
That's a good mic.
He's muted.
He's muted. Yeah.
All right, sorry. Here I am.
Good. Sounds good. Everyone ready then?
I'm gonna eat while we're doing this.
No probs.
You won't hear it. I have filters on. Maybe. Cookie tells me that's my back. Yeah, my monitors.
Okay.
Um.
All right.
So, how much back and forth are we gonna have? We're just gonna be like pick someone, talk about intro, kind of pick someone, talk about middle guard, and then
Yeah.
how much actual back and forth is it?
I'll lead it. So I'm going to get started, and welcome everyone. I hope you're enjoying the stream so far. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We have a lively discussion ahead of us for the next 90 minutes. My name is Dr. Norbert. I'll be your host and moderator this evening. And I wanted to first give an overview of what we're here to talk about. So basically, there has been a lot of competitive play, high-level competitive play going on Tabletop Simulator, and we've been using the normal format rules for that. But at the same time, there's been a bit of an undercurrent coming that Battle Realm, the alternative kind of pick and ban format that Atomic Mass Games has put out, may actually be better for organized play, and in particular high-level competitive play. And we've had a lot of people discussing it one way or the other, but I found that the discussions tend to be a little bit one-sided. So people would give a counterpoint to it, but generally the hosts of those podcasts would kind of be on one side of the equation or the other. So the goal here tonight is to have some people brought together, some who have been not entirely, but more on the pro side, that Battle Realm should be the way forward, and others who feel a little bit on the opposite side, where more that a normal format should be going forward. So that's what we're going to be discussing here tonight. I wanted to mention that we did a survey of the TTS community at the end of Season 4 just about this question, about whether we should go into Battle Realm for Season 5. To remind everybody of the stats there, 54% of the group, so just over half, said that they would prefer the normal format. 22% said that they would prefer Battle Realm, and 24% said they would be happy with either. So a bit about 2 to 1 that preferred normal over Battle Realm using those stats. However, we didn't at that time have a lot, as a community, have a lot of experience with the Battle Realm system. And so we're in the midst right now of a small mini league using the Battle Realm rules. And also these gentlemen here, amongst others, have been invited to an invitational high-level Battle Realm tournament that's going on over the next 3 weeks as well. And so we've got a few games now as a community under our belt. There's been quite a bit of discussion on it. And so hopefully tonight we can get some really interesting discussion going about where the community should be going to. So the agenda tonight will be first to have opening arguments, so an objective description of both the pros versus the cons of the Battle Realm system. We'll talk about whether it's better suited for competitive play. We'll talk a bit about if it should be better suited even for casual play, and then we'll do a little bit of a wrap up about whether it is indeed the future standard of organized play for Marvel Crisis Protocol. And then we'll have some audience question and answer. So everybody who's watching now, please do put your questions or comments into the chat as we do this, and I will be able to bring those up as we go along. So without further ado, let me first introduce my guests who have been very gracious tonight, coming from all around the world. Joining me in London is Pat Dunford, who will be speaking on the pro for the Battle Realm format. Say hello, Pat.
Hello.
And also on the pro side of the equation, very graciously getting up at 6 a.m. Sunday morning his time, is Morgan Reid from Canberra, Australia.
Hey, good morning, Norbs, and excellent pronunciation of Canberra. Well done.
Some War Machine days I've had a lot of friends in Australia, so it is not the easiest word. But then we have on the con side, so those who would prefer the normal format being the predominant format for competitive play is Sploosh, coming to us from Massachusetts, the United States. Say hello or wave.
Everyone.
Hello. And then we also have Nathan Stickney, also known as Sooner5 from Dallas, Texas, on the against side of the equation. Say hi, Nathan.
Hello.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I also wanted to mention, even though the two folks against the equation, against the Battle Realm, hail from the United States, this is definitely not a regional situation. We are not saying that the United States has a particular preference or not, just as how the how it worked out with the people that we invited onto the panel. Okay, in true MCP fashion, I'm going to do something crazy and use actual dice. I feel a little odd to see who's going to have the priority roll to get started tonight.
Oh,
I'm going to roll on the pro side first. And we've got 2 crits, a shield, a skull, and a blank. So could be all right. On the con side of the equation, we're rolling Oh gosh. Oh my lord. I rolled 3 hits and 2 wilds. So I think that's very clear what the universe is saying, that we should have the opening discussion from the con side of the equation. So Nathan and Sploose, why don't you help us understand as objectively as you can what you feel the benefits and drawbacks of the Battle Realm format is. Talk a little bit about whether it's going to benefit or hurt roster diversity, and what fixes may indeed have for the balance of the game, or is it not necessary? Can you just give us a rundown before we get into whether it's important for competitive or casual play?
Sooner, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of both pro and con, all four of us, but I think Morgan and Pat, they also, realize there's some con, and me and Sploosh also see the pro kind, part of it. So when it says I'm con against Battle Realms, I actually enjoy playing Battle Realms. I think it's a fun format. I do agree that I do not think it should be the standard competitive play right now, at least in Marvel Crisis Protocol. You spoke, I'll just address, at first you spoke about list diversity. I think of right now with the models that are out and the affiliations that are out, I think that you're not going to see as big of a difference in rosters. I do think the 4 to 6 characters you see on the table may be a little bit diverse and different than what you see in standard games, but I think you will see a lot more mirror matches. I think you're going to see multiple affiliations who really shine in this, and they're going to be taken by most everybody. You can look at the Invitational to really figure that out. I mean, we had 8 of the most competitive players in the world, and the rosters are extremely similar. I think that if you're building to win, not just go to your game night and have fun, I think there's not really a whole lot of reason to just take 10 to 12 of the best models in the game and then just kind of fill affiliations through that. So I think one con of it is I think the rosters will be very similar, whereas in standard play, like in Season 5, affiliations are all over the place. I mean, in one bracket, you could have one mono list of Web Warriors, one mono list of Black Order, a duel of Defenders and Wakanda. You see a lot of that, whereas I feel like you're going to see a lot of the same affiliations playing Battle Realms.
Sploosh, do you think, can you elaborate a little bit about why you think that is the case, what Nathan told us about the Battle Realm format, why this happens?
But I mean, it would be awesome. I really hope that AMG can get just more involved. Maybe not just competitive. I mean, you could kind of sneak these questions into a seemingly non-competitive conversation of, hey, you invented Battle Realms. Could you explain why? Like, why are bans set up the way they were? I've been an advocate of having some form of banning or visual choosing system since the beginning of this game, and I've made it pretty public. But the problem is Battle Realms, the way it's set up, it seems to me, and I can't put words in a developer's mouth, it seems to me they're sort of attacking affiliations, which I think is against the core concept of the entire game. And the reason I say that is because if they weren't attacking affiliations, they would allow people to pick 3 characters and then probably do something with gems. I'm not sure. Maybe just make it so you can't ban gems so that eventually you could get your gems at the end. Since I'm sure we've all noticed that after you've picked 5 characters in this game, you're probably done with your list anyway. Mm-hmm. So then, just pick the gems at the end or something. Also, gems would still hurt your character if gems were unbannable, because you just ban the character that uses the gem, and then the gem's just sitting there as a dead card. So I think you can incorporate gems better into this game. That's another fault of this format, is that Black Order is basically unplayable, and Defenders is sketchy at best, since they depend on the gem for their portal plays, which is a very big part of competitive play. So again, I can't be I can't say how the developers, why they did what they did. I can only say the end result is kind of what Suna was hinting at, which is that you end up doing these sort of tier lists, and you're less focused on synergies, which is another huge part of this game. So you're attacking the whole concept of the game, which is affiliations, and I'm a huge X-Men fan. I would never play X-Men in Battleground competitively. I don't think it's competitive. I think to insinuate that it even is disingenuous. And so then if you're not picking for affiliations, you're picking for more like people who are multi-affiliated and what's the best characters that are multi-affiliated, which, Okoye, different things. So I don't know. I don't want to take more time than that. I mean, people can use their own imaginations as to why things are the way they are. But I will say, I mean, the minute I saw this format, I was sort of speaking out loud in our Discord channel, and it took me about 20 minutes to figure this out. I mean, because once you start just doing a few sort of bands in your head, like a head sim kind of situation, you start noticing, okay, this isn't right. I can't play this affiliation very effectively. At the time, I was really high on Web Warriors, and I found it really annoying that I couldn't guarantee to get Ghost Spider. And then at the time, like, okay, I picked Miles because I really want to play Web Warriors. Oh, they're gonna always ban Ghost Spider. Kind of sucks, you know. So anyway, that was what got me to this point now, and I feel like my point has been a bit proven based on the statistics that have come forward.
All right. Thank you both. I'm hearing quite in summary that it is actually, if overall, I think what you've stated is basically is leading to less diversity in the game. But let's hear now from the pro side. Let's not. You can respond to some of the things that you've heard, but let's try to make it objective. Like, what is it about the Battle Realm format that makes it interesting in terms of its mechanics and may make it more of a better alternative to regular organized play? Who would like to start? Morgan?
Well, Pat has the throne chair, so it's got to be Pat.
You're going to defer to me? Okay. So to answer Norbert's question, right, and then Morgan, you can come in maybe with some specifics. I think the things that appeal about Battle Realm, obviously the degree to which they appeal is going to depend on the person, right? This is subjective. I think the things that any given player of the game might find appealing, the larger roster means you can include more characters and you can have more variety in what you play. So using the example of my own roster in the Invitational League and the Battle Realms TTS leagues that are going on now, I'm playing 4 affiliations in my weekly games. And there's no way I can ever play 4 affiliations in a normal 10-character roster with 8 tactics cards. That's just impossible. So one of the advantages in my mind is Battle Realms gives you more variety. You literally have 50% more characters and massively more tactics cards and crises that you're going to play with. If you're somebody that enjoys variety and wants games to be more different, I think there's an argument that Battle Realms does that. Now, to be fair, I know that Sploosh and Suna mentioned they think it doesn't play out that way in reality. I'll leave that point for now. We can come back to it. But I think on face level, there's more stuff you play with, so you have more variety in your games. In particular, I've really enjoyed the variety of crises. I think crises really dictate how you play competitive MCP, and I like that they're much more random, but that might not be for everybody. And I've really enjoyed the variety in tactics cards because I've found that tactics cards are incredibly restrictive, probably the most restrictive element in roster building in normal MCP. And I've really enjoyed being able to use more niche or corner case cards that I wouldn't be able to justify fitting into an 8 because I can only use them maybe 1 in 10 games. But when I can pick all of my cards for a given game, knowing what my opponent's playing, knowing the map, knowing the crisis, then there's more variety there as well. So for me, that is the biggest draw of Battle Realm, is that variety. And I suppose you would then infer that variety encourages you to have a broader skill set in terms of what models you're able to use effectively, what cards you're able to use, and that might be the draw for competitive play. What do you think, Morgan?
Pat, that was a very good summary. Look, I only had sort of 3 broad points about what I think are some of the benefits. The first one was variety, which I think you covered in more depth and more eloquently than I would. So I agree with variety. That's a plus for the format. My second point that I'd like to highlight is I enjoy the format for the ability to dismiss opposing characters. And I think this can, again, it's subjective. Some people might find that quite a negative thing. But I think this is both good for competitive and the casual player, and maybe more so, or in some aspects, the casual player, because, for example, if you really dislike playing against certain characters, let's call it a big fat head called MODOK, you have the ability, not all the time, but if your opponent picks it first, you can't. But you have the ability to dismiss characters that you don't enjoy playing against. So I think that's a benefit. Sometimes you might go to your game store, you might be playing games, and your opponent is playing the same characters over and over and over. And you might be a non-confrontational person, and you don't feel like talking to that person saying, hey, look, I'm really sick of playing your MODOK. Can you do something different? Instead, this format allows a mechanic for you to have some sort of control or agency to stop playing against those characters you dislike. So that's a good aspect, I think. But again, that's subjective. And the final point, which Pat also brought on, was really that tactic card freedom. So really, the three good points that I like about the mechanics is the variety, the ability to dismiss, and then also the freedom to play those tactic cards.
That's interesting that you guys were talking about variety. So let me remark on some of the thoughts that I've had listening to some of the other commentators. There is a number of affiliations that don't seem to work, though, in this format. So, I mean, that has to be acknowledged as a drawback. Or would you not agree with that?
So, look, I think Black Order, with the current accepted wisdom that, hey, we want to play Thanos with Stone or Stonezer, and then we want to play Corvus with Reality with Proxima. If that's the accepted wisdom, if that's the only way to play a competitive Black Order roster, then I agree. Black Order is terrible in this format, playing that style with the gems. I've tried to build Black Order rosters for hours on end, and I come up with unaffiliated past, I think, 16 points. It doesn't work. So in that aspect, I agree. In the other aspects for the other affiliations, just as a building little exercise a while back when it first came out, I tried to build Spider Foes with their 4 models, which is, I'm going to forget the models here, but it's Green Goblin, Venom, Doc Ock, and Kingpin. You take those 4, take Taskmaster and Winter Soldier as 6 characters, and then you flesh out your other 9, and you can make leadership and affiliation at every points level with 4 to 5 wide. Now, is that a great 4 to 5 wide squad? Well, I think Spider Foes is probably not very good anyway, but you can do it. So I think, and I could be wrong, but I think every affiliation in the game can make 4 to 5 wide at the points level or the crisis level that you're playing at. So it is advantage to have a far bigger roster affiliation list like Avengers and A-Force and Cabal, absolutely, but it is playable for the small affiliations. I've not tried playing a lot of those small affiliations outside sort of Brotherhood, but it's playable. Whether it's good or not, I don't know. The format's too new, and I haven't played enough to give any sort of feedback on that.
Yeah. How do you respond to that, Nathan?
Well, so when he says, just to put this in there, when he says every affiliation is playable with 4 to 5 wide, that's including the rogue agents. You can't do that if you don't include the rogue agents. So I think a lot of people, if I'm just frank and honest, I mean, are not super excited to put Winter Soldier on the table. Not me. I'm playing him in the mini league, and I've played him in every game. But I think the vast majority of MCP players, that doesn't necessarily excite them. And I think it all comes down to, like everybody has said, subjectively. This is a superhero game. A lot of people, we're in the minority here. We study this game. We play this game a lot. Most people do not do that. Most people play this game for their big superheroes to smash other people's superheroes. And, I just think this can kind of limit that. I don't think it's great for casual players, if I'm being dead honest. In my last mini league Battle Realms game, my opponent had a very good list, but he probably, didn't have maybe quite the knowledge. And I was able to, just with very simple 1 or 2 bans, make it where he either had to play a point down or couldn't play his affiliation that he picked just by a simple 1 or 2 bans. And it wasn't that and it's just because he didn't put probably the hours that we have into a roster that could get every point. And I think you would find that with casual players a lot more often. I just don't know if it's a necessary step we need to take. I enjoy it. I like it. I like the challenge of trying to make a roster with them banning stuff. I think it's fun. My problem with it is I think if we make it the competitive gameplay, I think then it becomes the standard gameplay, because people are going to want to practice what is the competitive gameplay. We know this from War Machine. We know this from X-Wing. They're going to want to practice whatever is the competitive, and it will become the standard. And I just don't know if this is what we want as the standard right now. This may change. There might be some other stuff that, we get more releases, we get more affiliation leaders, and that may really open the door for Battle Realms. I just think in its state right now, you just can't have this as the main standard format.
Can I add to that, please?
Sure thing.
All right. So first of all, most people, I mean, I'm sure we all can experience or have experienced the moment where you painted something maybe like 3 months ago and you finally play it. Or you just have characters. It's like mostly like your first games or whatever. This game has like the fastest release schedule of any game I've ever played, which could be considered a negative, but it's really cool because the meta moves very quickly. So if our argument is like this helps with like boredom or something, then like, man, I don't know what to tell you. Like most people only play like one game a week at most, and that's probably way less, right? So if you only play like even let's say twice a month, you're going to want to play the mini that you painted that is new and is your cool, exciting mini. It might not even be a power gaming thing, but let's move on from that, because I think any argument of like this is more interesting and all that is like that's just not relevant in Marvel Crisis. This game is moving fast. The meta's quick. There's release schedule is insane. I mean, granted, these delays might slow us down a little, and we're already having like anxiety over it. I know me not being able to play dominoes driving me crazy, but forget that, right? That's just for the normal people. But I'll touch on the objectives thing. Objectives are a big part of competitive play. Being able to choose your objectives. I felt like talking to Cookie after his game and after my game. I wouldn't have, I don't know. I wasn't happy with the objectives choices I had. I felt kind of trapped. And I think it's like 20% of the time you can't even choose. You both just have the same objectives. Like, it's just like, oh, my choice is Demons Downtown or Demons Downtown. Okay, here we go. This has been up for debate on our Discord channel, like how important are objectives as a choice in the game overall, like as a turn zero thing. I think it's easily like over 20% of the entire game is decided by just what objectives you picked before the game started and what you picked during the game. That's gone. Your agency's gone. Oh man, sorry. Give me a second. I want to hit the band face thing as a huge discussion, but there's something I'm missing that we talked about a second ago.
I'll come back.
I think. Well, hold on. Standard play I think standard play actually should have 10 tactics cards to touch on the options of tactics cards. I actually agree with that, and so I think it's cool to discuss that. Oh, you get more tactics cards, but honestly, I think that might be a weakness of standard that could easily be fixed. Okay, you know what? Let's just move. Okay, I know what I was going to get into and why. So the banning. Before I get to banning, I'm just going to say what characters I'm playing in my game. Sure, I'm playing like a high tier list, and I think you could go back and forth debating each game between what we've already seen in the international of, did he play the right character into the other opponent, and was whose roster was more favored than the other. For me, competitively, having like even like a 80% or 90% good list isn't good enough for me. I'm very competitive. I want like the 100% best list I could have taken for that situation, and that's taken away from me. Which also goes into, it's unacceptable when we're talking competitive that Morgan would use the word playable to describe any affiliation. That's unfair to anyone who's a fan of whatever. For me, X-Men or Web Warriors or whatever, I want a competitive roster for X-Men. I don't want a playable roster, which I'm going to lead now. This is where I'm leading to. The pick and ban phase. Do you guys agree? Is the pick and ban phase acceptable in choosing the outcome of the game? Like, is it a skill? And I think everyone needs to chime in. I don't think it's a skill personally, but let me get into why this is a problem. And I'll give you an analogy. Let's say we're all going to meet for some volleyball tournament, and the Chinese team arrived one day before the tournament, has massive jet lag, and had to fill like 7 hours of paperwork for their COVID vaccinations before they could get into their volleyball tournament. Would you feel good as a competitive player to be playing against this Chinese volleyball team, that knowing that they had all these hardships to go through just to get there and they're not at their 100%? Because that's what's happening here. We're creating a situation where objectives are maybe not the best for your team. The roster you pick is not quite 100%. And we're creating these like variables that create an maybe not quite even game. And competitively, we should all want to play our opponent at their best. And as soon as the pick phase ends and somebody doesn't feel great about what they have, I'm not saying their team is bad, but if their team is like 92%, and you beat that person when you maybe feel like you got 100% optimized team, or maybe 98%. We could argue over what 100% is, and no one maybe will get. I'm sure someone's going to say, "Oh, well, not everybody gets 100% roster." Fine, someone got 98%, someone else got 88%. The game was decided possibly by those percentages, all based on the ban and pick phase. Which is that a skill? Is that something we even want? Why it goes back originally? I said, why does it exist? Why are we even doing ban and picking?
Yeah, let me pick it up there, Sploosh, because that is ultimately what we wanted to come back to. There was a lot said, guys, so I want to give Pat and Morgan equal time here. So feel free to explore any of the points that you just heard. But maybe you could start with, why do you feel like this was necessary, or why do we feel we need to go this direction compared to just using normal play as a starting point? One of you will need to come off mute. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'm thinking to try and answer.
There was a
I
lot
don't know.
there, so take your time.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it is necessary. I mean, I don't think the normal way to play MCP is bad. I love playing MCP in all its forms. I love all the formats; they're all great. I play no matter what.
Fair.
So it's rather just thinking about the pros and cons of each, and you weigh those up, and you decide, okay, no format is perfect. There's going to be a set of pros and cons. Which set of pros and cons do we want? And so I think you can't just look at the negatives for Battle Realm. You have to also look at the supposed negatives for other formats, and then you have to weigh those up. So I agree that the picking and banning is probably the most contentious point of Battle Realm, right? And I absolutely agree with Sploosh that I think a lot of people don't enjoy it. And I've witnessed as well, a lot of people just screw it up, right? And end up sabotaging their games, especially people who are less experienced with Battle Realm, end up sabotaging their games to the point where maybe they still have a chance to win, but they feel dissatisfied coming out of the pick and ban, and it reduces their fun. Mm-hmm. They think, I'm not really happy that I'm playing a threat down and unaffiliated and my opponent isn't. I feel like I'm playing now with a handicap, and I don't like that. I absolutely think that is one of the negatives of Battle Realm. I think the question is whether or not that is acceptable. If we go back to the discussion point of, for a competitive format, you've got to assume, I think at some level, that when we're aiming it as a competitive format, people are competent. Right? Because if you're not competent, you're going to lose regardless in any format. If it's competitive, right? The better player is just going to smash you. If you're new, you're just going to lose. I'm sorry, but when we're talking about a competitive format, that's the truth. You've got to assume that people have at least some degree of experience, and therefore they're going to avoid those kind of traps and pitfalls. And they're going to have decent rosters. They're going to know how to play them. And so that's not going to be a big problem. And then the question, I guess, is to what extent do you like the variety and the kind of on-the-spot decision-making you have to make with banning and picking versus the prescribed teams and combos that you can make them much more easily in a regular format, right? Is it really cool that you have very specific combos and you say, okay, at 17 threat, I'm always playing these characters? Or would you rather say, I don't know why I'm playing at 17 threat, I'll figure it out as I go along.
Mm-hmm. Morgan, what do you say about that, especially for somebody who is kind of new, as Pat was saying about this? Is this an extra barrier that we need?
Look, I think most people would agree that this is probably a harder format to get your head around and get into than standard. In terms of picking, I mean, in standard, I think you pick 24 cards, so 10 characters, eight tactics, and then 6 crises. Mm-hmm. In Battle Realms, you're picking, I think it's 25. Which is 15 characters and 10 crises. So the picks are about the same, but the synergies in accessing Battle Realms is probably harder. And so, broadly speaking, I'd have a shoot from the hip and say, it's probably something you want to look at after about 10 or 15 games under your belt, at probably the minimum. I don't think you would dive straight into this format. I think this it requires more advanced knowledge of the game, and it rewards players who have a broader knowledge of the game and really understand and excel at the MCP fundamentals, because you can't just play the same thing over and over and have those turn zero set plays and this is exactly what I do in this exact crisis setup at this exact point level. You need to adapt and think on the fly, and it tests your all-round ability. So that's probably what I would say about the new stuff. The only other point I'll just add to Pat, I think Pat made a lot of good points there, and look, so did Douglas. But this is talking about why we're talking about this. Well, AMG have released these formats, so we've got 3 formats that we can play. Now, what they haven't done yet is release any sort of guidance about, hey, are AMG going to do some sort of competitive organised play? And then if they do some sort of competitive organised play, what's the format going to be? So we're having, I think, this community discussion, and there's a lot of emotion and passion around it, which is good because people care about the game. But we're having a discussion around it because we haven't got guidance from AMG yet. Now, they might come out tomorrow and say, hey, guys, AMG, we've thought about this. The new format for competitive organised play is going to be standard. And then the discussion's over in terms of what we're having for our main format. Or they might come out and say, hey, the format is Battle Realms. So we just don't know. So I suppose the point of that is that we're discussing the pros and cons of different format. In this case, it's just Battle Realm, not Collector, and just saying, hey, look, is this something that's worth having a go? And I think it's great that actually the community's having a go at it instead of just writing it off without trying it. People are participating in the Battle Realm mini leagues. They're talking about it, and hopefully they have an open mind and give it a go before you either write it off or praise it being the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really momentous moment because we're trying to figure out what we're going to do in season 5. Each season has gotten more and more bigger, and we want to make sure that the community is well equipped to deciding what format they'd prefer. So it is quite helpful on this. So I thank you all again for having this conversation. But I feel, Morgan, like the Australian community in particular kind of got excited about this format because it added something to the game. Could you kind of verbalize what it was that they felt was either missing from the normal game, or that somehow this adds an extra layer and make it so wonderful?
Sure. So I think the Battle Realm format released about 4 to 5 months ago now. And I tried to scroll back through our little podcast to see the episode we did on it. And I think it was about 4 months ago. So the format dropped. And then I think we had a local event that weekend. And luckily where we are in Canberra, Australia, we weren't COVID restricted. So we had a pretty good turnout of about, 12 or 15 players. And we all decided to give the format a go. It was brand new. And this is, most of us have been playing standard MCP for about a year or so, and this was a brand new format and something different. Now, at the time, it was still, from our subjective opinion, it was the Modoc-dominated meta. This was, as I said, 4 to 5 months ago. And our sort of local group were sick of Modoc rosters, effectively. So we played this format, and I can't speak for everyone there, but there was overwhelmingly positive reviews about how much enjoyable the format was and how enjoyable the day was to have a day. And we've done sort of standard, game days every month. And so this was a new one to do a Battle Realm one. And it was overwhelmingly positive about how well people enjoyed the format and the interaction about dismissing and recruiting. So based off that, and I thought it was great, we did the podcast and we were beaming about how good the format was, which then received a lot of negative feedback from people who hadn't tried it, which was a bit disappointing, but that is what it is on the internet.
Can I ask, though, what the part was fun? I mean, was it the mechanic of kind of like in Magic the Gathering or the drafting format, where the draft itself seems to be as much fun as a mechanic as it is to the games afterwards? Was it just the mechanic, or was it because, like you said, people didn't have to play the same old lists that they've been playing for the last couple of months?
Look, I mean, I can speak for myself, but the general feedback, and I apologise to the Aussies who are watching if I've missed this, some of the points, but I think there were 3 things that were positive about it. The mechanic itself was enjoyable, and whether that's because it's something new, and hey, this is just great because it's new, but the mechanic itself of recruiting and dismissing was enjoyable. Allowing players to sort of remove those Modoc type characters more often than not because they don't enjoy playing against them, that breathes sort of fresh air into our local scene of our local game days. To force players to do something different. And then the third thing, which is probably more intangible and subjective based on your play group, is that the format facilitated a more relaxed and I suppose friendly atmosphere or environment for gameplay. In standard, we seem to be so constantly testing, adapting, refining our rosters for the leagues and big events. So it becomes a little bit cutthroat, and I think that's. I mean, I've played a few game systems as all you blokes have. That's probably pretty normal. It becomes pretty serious testing and practice, and constantly sort of turning the gears to keep finding the optimized roster. Whereas in this battle realm format, we threw all that out the window, and it sort of facilitated more enjoyable games. So I think the mechanics, the ability to dismiss and recruit, and then also just the general environment it facilitated, sort of equaled probably the most enjoyable MCP game day that any of us had experienced. So that was, I suppose, my summary from 4 months ago.
Thanks, Morgan. Now, there's a question that came up that makes a good point about delayed releases. At the time of the Battle Realm, where that kind of caught on in Australia, you guys were reasonably up to date on releases at that point, right?
Yeah, I think we were in a good
That
spot.
That wasn't the issue. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we are now.
So Nathan, you and I've played War Machine a long time, and you know very well that there's always boogeymen that come around in cycles. Is there a reason to be concerned that we need Battle Realm to do this because of certain boogeymen that happen in MCP? I mean, there are always going to be interesting lists out there that are going to be more powerful by just a bit, even in a well-balanced game, and we should be able to kind of find counters for that, and that could be the fun part about it until new releases come out or new techniques come out that change the way people play. Isn't that sufficient?
I do think it is sufficient. As you know, and Pat and everybody who's played War Machine, I mean, in War Machine, there were just, if you ran into a list and you had another list, I mean, there were just a hard counter where it really didn't matter how great you played the game. I mean, you were very, very likely going to lose. I don't think that's the case in Marvel Crisis Protocol. I think even if number one, even MODOK in his heyday had counters. You put him on a D scenario, you push him with Shuri. I mean, those were just simple counters at the very start. And, you look, he's the big bad of MCP. He's still the best model. And he's getting weaker and weaker as the day goes by. I mean, there's more and more stuff now to take care of MODOK. So, I mean, I think that for your point, I think that this game is a little more balanced in its generality than, say, like a game like War Machine. I wasn't big into X-Wing or any of those, so I can't really speak to that. But I think that you have a balance, that there's not really any hard counters. I think, Marvel Crisis Protocol is a 60-40 almost in any game you play. I don't think there's really anything worse in a matchup than a 60-40. And, Battle Realms, I think, unfortunately, you can start getting more of a diverse, like I said, and like kind of Sploosh said, with the pick ban, I mean, you could really screw your opponent where you're just in a really, really bad spot before the game even starts. Whereas in standard, I don't think you really run into that. Sure, you can have a counter where if you're running, Criminal Syndicate into Web Warriors, I mean, Web Warriors is a good affiliation to go into them. But I think you don't find the hard counters, is the word I'll use, in this game like you do in other gaming systems that you necessarily need a pick ban. I enjoy the pick ban in the sense that there's some strategies that have come out that I really, really dislike, mainly the grab and run strategy with like Enchantress and things like that. So I try to ban her as soon as I can because that's just not the game of I want to play. It's not very interactive. But I think as in, competitive talk, I think this game is so balanced and it does such a great job that you don't need necessarily a pick ban. If I see that my opponent has been playing MODOK or likes MODOK, then I should, in my roster as a competitive player, have an answer to that or have something I can put on the table that gives me at least a 40% chance.
Mm-hmm. Sploosh, that's a good point, though. Is it, isn't it better to be able to, you've talked on your podcast in the past that there are these so-called perfect games where there's no attacks being made are not good for the game overall. Shouldn't Battle Realm then be the answer to try to avoid those situations?
Man, I feel like you just send me a nice slow ball so I can hit a home run because I watched Morgan dismantle poor Cookie without making one attack in Battle Realms. The very first game of Battle Realms, and we did attack. I mean, come on, man. Where was the stoppage? I know Morgan will say, hey, Cookie could have made some better choices. That's true. I do think, though, that even though Cookie got completely destroyed, if Cookie had played a little better, made a little maybe a correct ban or something, the game may have just ended on turn 4 or 5 instead of like turn 3. So, I don't think it's stopping anything. The access to all the tactics cards is actually a little bit of a problem in itself because you can get really crazy. Like you have affiliations like A-Force that can bring like 4 tactics cards or something, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm just playing because they exist in my hand. My Battle Realms tactics cards pile that I've saved is 20 cards thick. I mean, in my last game, I was having some fun, but I ran like Usurp the Throne, and no matter the cost, or what is it, all you've got, Con of Forever. I mean, I had like the full boat of just complete destruction, and I don't know that that's actually that viable in standard format because there's just such a restriction for tactics cards. You really got to play for all situations, and kind of like what Suna was saying about countering Modoc. It's something you should know that like, oh, this person's roster. Um, in fact, when Suna and I played in season 3, I purposely made it a 15 threat game, knowing that he would struggle to play Modoc comfortably. And he was even saying after the game, like maybe I should have just played Modoc in a threat down. But having my tactics cards being reliable allows me to enhance my roster. And I can't say enough how having control over your tactics cards really helps out maybe some weaknesses and helps you to counter things that maybe you struggle against. And so I didn't want to see Modoc, and I found a way to get around it. And that's a strategy that competitive players use. And I would just conclude by saying that competitive players, which is what we're here for, we're not just talking about random games, they should not be scared to play the boogeyman. They should have practiced and have a plan, and then show the world that they can handle it, and doing it at the highest level. With no band-aids or asterisks over our victories.
That is a good point. I mean, you could look at it that way. But Pat, I want to hear your thoughts about does this banning really help improve the meta instead of trying to find ways to compete in the meta, if you will?
So, first off, I completely agree with Splush's sentiment that when you're talking about competitive play, you need to be able to deal with whatever the boogeymen are. Whenever you have a different rule system or a different format, you're going to create a different meta. And then that meta is going to have things in it that are powerful, and they're going to form the competitive environment. Right? That's just the way it's going to be. You're never going to create a system where everything is perfectly balanced. Right? That's just not going to work in the kind of game we're playing. Whenever you change the rule set for how you create rosters or how you play the game, just things change in their power level, right? Just some things get more powerful, some things get worse. Some factions get better, some affiliations get worse. And we've talked already about how, for example, the way picks and bans work right now, Black Order is really, really difficult to play. It's a fantastic example where in Battle Realm, compared to Standard, in Standard, Black Order is pretty solid. In Battle Realm, it's maybe the worst because it's so hard to build, maybe. Kind of early days, but just as to give an idea. When we have this new format, it changes what is good, and it changes the meta, and it changes what you have to do to be successful competitively. And basically, it's subjective. You've got to decide, okay, but is it better or worse? Well, how do you decide that, right? Is it about the quality of the games? What does that mean, right? We've already talked about maybe things like games with no attacks are bad. Maybe they happen just as much. Maybe they don't. I think it's too early to say. But if that was a metric, it's something you could measure, I guess, over time as we get more games done. Me personally, Battle Realms is, of all the formats of MCP, Battle Realms is my favorite to actually play the game, right? Ignoring the bans, because I personally don't think a ban face, but whatever, it's fine. It's like a necessary evil. Ignoring the bans, the actual game where I have a good but maybe not quite perfect roster and a broad selection of tactics cards, and I have to adapt to a random crisis. For me, I love how that plays. It's the most fun way to play the game. And I just accept that the meta is going to be different, but that's fine. Maybe Black Order are much worse, but maybe something like Avengers are a lot better. And I think we're kidding ourselves when we're talking about high-level competitive play if we say that every affiliation and every character in Standard is equally good and viable, because that's not true. Right? And yes, when you have Battle Realm, some things that are good in Standard will get worse, but other things that are bad in Standard will get better. It will just change what is good.
Do you feel that? One second. I just want to say. I want to be clear. Do you feel though, for the fun part of this for you, is it then important though to pick the right tactic cards to make sure that you have a fair game, a game that you have?
I don't think so. I am. I'll be honest. I wasn't quite following you, Sploosh. Maybe you want to clarify. But in regards to your point about tactics cards, I think in Battle Realm you can pick any tactics cards, right? So you made a point that you thought being able to pick the right tactics cards was valid, but I wasn't sure if you were talking about Battle Realm or Standards.
It's in Battle Realm. It's promoting multiple affiliations, which just encourages the don't play one affiliation, but play tons of them, and you have no restriction on tactics cards, so you can just kind of do everything. I mean, even just including Killmonger, which is 1 out of 15 characters, opens up a whole boat of strategy with tactics cards, a whole different way to play the game, and we're going way far against the core mechanic of the game, which is loving and owning up to one of. I mean, you could play one affiliation, you could play 2 affiliations, whatever, in standard play, but the idea is you are affiliated, and that's your team, and you play affiliated tactics cards, and you build that affiliation. But right now, it's promoting sort of this power synergies of multiple affiliations and just cram the best stuff in. And don't worry about tactics cards because you have them all. So
definitely, no,
it's just a totally different way of playing the game.
I think it's a great example of what I was saying, right, about how it changes the meta. Because you're right, in Standard you play 1 or 2 affiliations, right, 99% of the time. In Battle Realm you play probably 2 to 4 at the moment, and that could change, right, as we get deeper into the format and we innovate on it. But you definitely play maybe twice as many affiliations on average. Is that better or worse? I mean, it's just different, right? Some people will like it more, some people will like it less. But I'm not convinced that it's necessarily worse. I think you're still playing with cool characters that you enjoy. You're still playing affiliated if you want to. And I'm a little bit suspect of invitational lists. And I know the 4 of us are 50% responsible for that. But personally, I don't have a good idea of what is best in Battle Realm. So I think I picked the low-hanging fruit. I picked something that was obviously good without playing a lot of games. I don't think it's fair to say that we have collectively nailed the Battle Realm meta. More like it's a starting point that would develop. And could be wrong, but I'm optimistic that some of the deep affiliations that are a little bit unpopular in Standard play, like Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy, would do a lot better in Battle Realm.
Mm-hmm. Nathan, you wanted to respond to something? Do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I just want to say real quick, I agree with what Pat said in the fact that, you're playing a new format, so your power levels are going to change. The one caveat I would put to that is when you're changing the power levels, you're making some things in Battle Realm unplayable to an extent. If we're completely honest, there's multiple affiliations on the competitive level that are pretty much unplayable if you're trying to win a five game tournament. I don't think there's really anything that's unplayable in Standard, and I think that's been proven. Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers. I know Art did pretty well with Avengers, took them pretty high. I think that, yeah, sure, the power level changes, but unplayable is a strong word in this game.
Shall I reply to that?
Please.
I just want to look. You're right. Maybe it's a bit hyperbolic, so I'll step back from that. But one thing, and the main point I want to get across is just don't have that many Battle Realm games or rosters. So I think we're making a big assumption that is not necessarily true when we look at what's taken in the Invitational and we say that's all Battle Realm has to offer. And it would be like if we had an 8-player Standard Invitational, there's probably more affiliations represented in our Battle Realm rosters than there would be if the same 8 people just had to take normal rosters, right? There's probably not that much in it. and there would probably still be a bunch of affiliations and a bunch of characters that are untaken. So to take like a snapshot of just 8 players with 8 rosters and say this is Battle Realm, and then compare it to thousands of games played over the last year, right, with hundreds of players, it's a bit unfair. It's not really a fair comparison to say one is deeper than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just take us 4 out of the character, I mean, and I know Cookie's big on Black Order, but if we were playing our standard list, I mean, you'd be X-Men, Criminal Syndicate, Eighth Force, Wakanda, and Brotherhood. I mean, it's like 5 characters out of 4 people, or 5 affiliations. Like, diversity is totally there. It's not. I don't even think we're disputing the diversity, right? I think there's an agreement here that clearly standard is way more diverse as a format and competitively diverse. We're not talking like, oh, you can do okay, you know. We're talking like you can believe that you're going to win playing this affiliation. I mean, we're not disputing that, right?
I think Pat is actually.
Maybe someone listening might not realize that we all agree on it.
No, actually,
No,
Pat
I
disagrees.
definitely don't
Go
agree.
ahead, Pat. Go.
But maybe, look, Morgan, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree before I carry on?
I think he just AFK'd, actually.
Sorry, I just ducked away and had to
Okay.
let the dog out. What was the point that Sploosh made after all that?
Okay, I was saying, do we agree
Quickly.
that standard is
Quickly.
more diverse?
No. No.
We don't.
So
Well,
So
go on,
I-
Morgan. Tell us why. Tell us why why you feel that way.
Well, so Battle Realm, we've done a. I mean, have you got? Okay, so have we done the comparative analysis between the Battle Realm mini league across the 4 brackets versus standard? I haven't done that comparative analysis.
Yeah, we had Xavier Protocols put up an article. He didn't compare season 4 to the mini league, but he did do the what were the most popular characters in crises, etc. thing down there.
All right, and so I've not seen that. Was it roughly about the same in terms of characters selections and popularity? I assume it would be. The stats would be.
There was a glut of characters that were skewed, like quite heavily preferred. I can call it up while you're talking.
Yeah, I think just having a blanket statement saying, "Can we all agree standard is more diverse than Battle Realm?" I can't get behind that at this stage, Douglas. I've got to say, it's too new. And what do you mean by variety? Are you talking about what affiliations are played? Are you talking about what affiliations are taken? Are you talking about what characters are played? So there's so many different angles to that, and you might have a specific point that is absolutely right, but I think it's just a blanket statement that I'm just not going to agree to.
Does anyone else want to? I feel alone here. Come on, guys.
I mean, I think when we're talking apples and oranges here, I think if we're talking about, I mean, look, I agree that the Invitational is not the be all end all of the Battle Realms, but I have some stats here. Well, and I won't even bring these up because Pat doesn't want, I mean, he's saying throw out the Invitational. Unfortunately, that's the only data we have, right? I mean, the Battle Realms mini league, we can get that data, but I mean, those are
events as well.
So
Well-
yeah, that's right. We did a one-day tournament in Battle Realm format a little while, 2 months ago.
yeah. I don't know. Did anybody get any data from that?
We have data from it, but I don't have it on hand now, and that was quite early on. I mean, it was literally I think the first time people were playing Battle Realm.
I mean, I said this in an opening statement, and this will probably go a little pro and a little con in both of this arguments. I think that the actual models you put on the table will be different. I think there will be more variety in that because of the pick and ban. Okay. But I think the roster composition is going to be extremely stale. And I think it's going to be the diversity in that is not going to be, if you're trying to win, I think you're going to take the 10 most powerful characters in the list. There's no reason not to. There's zero reason not to take the 10 most powerful characters in the game. Like, why would you not take MODOK, Medusa, Enchantress? I mean, you would take all those characters, Okoye. There's just no reason not to if you're trying to win. If you're trying to have fun and play with your buddies, then sure. But standard is that same way. There's going to be diversity. When you're playing casually, there's going to be diversity because you're playing for fun. You're playing what you want to play. But if we're going to say this is a competitive format, then the list composition is going to be very similar. And
Just have a
go ahead.
question maybe to prompt you. Can you explain, because I think I know where you're coming from, but I don't think it's not super clear to me, and maybe it would help some of the people listening in as well. But can you explain why you think Battle Realm people are always going to gravitate to the powerful characters, and in Standard that's not going to be the case, or why there's going to be more diversity? Because I don't think that's very clear.
Yeah. So that's a good question, because you don't have the ability. We just talked about you can play 3 or 4 affiliations in Battle Realms. Okay. So you don't have that ability in Standard. Don't have the tactics cards to do it. You don't have the room to fit them in, because if you want to fit your affiliation in Standard, you only have 3-4 spots a lot of times where you can put the power characters in. In Battle Realms, you have 8 open slots where you can put the best characters in. So why not just put the 8 best characters in there? And then you're always, for the most part, you're usually going to have some overlap already of the 7 characters you've already chosen. So you're looking at, in my opinion, enlist composition is going to be very similar. Now, like I said, I think the actual models put on the table may be more diverse because of the pick and, but I think that's completely because of the pick and ban.
It's also kind of like disingenuous, because like, sure, it's like this. Let's just say there's 20 characters that are like top tier playable. I mean, if everyone's playing 15 of them, if they're choosing, it's like that's pretty much the game. Where I mean, when I play X-Men, I feel fine playing Beast, Storm, and Domino or Wolverine or Cable or something. Like, it's not a tier list. It's just that's what I need to play that affiliation, you know. And there's no reason to play something that's not the tier list right now. It's the way that it. We can't. I. No one here is going to be able to speak unless they're a playtester and wants to break their NDA. Nobody can tell us why they made exactly the way they did, the way the ban works. I've spent time talking to people, maybe we all have, of how I would have liked this to be, and that's not what we're going to talk about today. But there are other ways this could have been handled, but we have to deal with what they gave us, and what they gave us is something that attacks affiliations and promotes this like kind of just sort of big chunk of tier characters that happen to be similarly affiliated. It's and the way I summarize it is kind of good guys versus bad guys. That's just to me how it plays out. So, you pick your best good guys and pick the best bad guys. And maybe you have a little room for some unaffiliated characters. And that's pretty much how it's designed.
So do you think that's true, Morgan? Do you think that the Battle Realm format devolves into just the sort of generically good characters, and you just cobble together an affiliation as best you can, and then just fill it up with good characters that are always good?
So I don't know about the others, but when I build a roster in Standard, I'll build my core in my affiliation, and then I'll add the best characters I possibly can to flesh those that core out at different points levels. In Battle Realms, funnily enough, I build my core and then I fill it with the best characters possible to flesh out at the point levels. So the difference is, I think, in my mind, is the overlapping or the dual affiliated characters where you can gain efficiency in what core affiliations you pick. So, an easy example to visualize, in Season 4, I played Brotherhood. My core was Magneto, Mystique, Toad. And I just added characters to that virtually every time. In Battle Realms, I'm looking for probably a couple of affiliations that have some overlapping characters. So I think Cabal and Asgard is a good example, where Enchantress is a powerful overlapping character. And so I might lean away from Brotherhood in Battle Realms and lean into something like Asgard and Cabal, because it offers good overlapping characters that are dual affiliated. But the point is that the methodology of how I pick my squads in Battle Realms and Standard is exactly the same. I pick my core. In Battle Realms, I have a little bit less agency on what my core is. My opponent has a say. And then I will just add the best characters I possibly can. So that's not unique to Battle Realms or Standard. I think it's the same for both.
All right. Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah. Pat, I'm going to come at it from a different angle, but I want to make sure, Pat, do you feel any differently or want to add to that before I move on?
No, I agree. I think you just pick the affiliations you want to play, throw in the good characters. I think one thing that happens with the pick and ban is the picks and bans you have a choice. You can either ensure you get an affiliation or ensure you get your first pick of the best unaffiliated characters, but you can't necessarily do both. Sometimes it depends, but generally speaking, you're going to have a good affiliation core missing maybe one of the key pieces, and then what your opponent allows you to take of the unaffiliated characters, or you're going to have the premium unaffiliated characters, but you might then have to play without a leadership or without an affiliation entirely. And then what I like about that is it creates the variety that Suna mentioned in terms of the models you're actually seeing on the table. But I agree that ultimately, like, roster that I make in Battle Realm and the roster I make in Standard, I mean, my Battle Realm roster is my Standard roster plus 5 characters. It has 5 characters more variety. I don't see why it is less variety in any way.
All right, so let me bring to you guys on the pro side of Battle Realms the kind of a sort of the other side of that same coin, and I'm going to use Inhumans as an example. And I could be wrong about this, but I feel like they aren't necessarily a top tier faction, but they do play really well, provided they have all the tools that they kind of are composed of. So what I mean by that is to me, Inhumans doesn't really work unless you have Black Bolt, Medusa, and Lockjaw together, and then the rest of it can be flavored to taste. Okay, and so with the pick and ban format, you know if you're going to want to play Inhumans, you'll be able to pick the Black Bolt straight away because you want to guarantee you get that affiliation bonus. But then your opponent's going to knock off Lockjaw or Medusa, and then you're out of luck with kind of a gimped affiliation from that point forward. I mean, is that okay for you guys, or is it a matter then of trying to pivot into different types of builds that might be better, and you have to be clever about how you design your rosters to do that, or do you pivot now into an entirely different affiliation that you happen to bring along, or do you see where I'm going?
I do, and look, I'll jump in before Pat. Norbs, I think you've identified probably what I think is the biggest downside of Battle Realms right now. So I think it's important to decouple the mechanics of the format. It's important to decouple the mechanics of the format with the character pool and the affiliation pool we have right now. Okay. So I think the mechanics of the format is excellent. Is it excellent right now? I don't think so, because I think what you've identified that's one example and many more. I think Black Order is probably the easiest example, is that the affiliations that haven't had their full releases, don't have their multiple leaders, and don't have the big long list of affiliated characters like Avengers and Cabal and etc. A-Force, make it harder if they rely to be competitive on one clutch or key character like we see in Inhumans at the moment. I think it's Medusa. So well identified. So it's just the mechanics in the format is good, but I think right now we don't have the amount of release of characters to really support the format as its best could be, if that makes sense.
It does. Pat?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think there's ways you can make it work, but you can't do exactly what you described and have it work consistently, right? You can't guarantee to have your 2 first choices. That's the whole point of the pick ban, right? You don't get the 2 first choices. So if you absolutely want 3 characters, you're going to lose one of them when your opponent gets the first ban, assuming they know what they're doing. There are ways to work around it, but those vary depending on the affiliation and the character pool. Sometimes it's reliable, sometimes it's not. So to give you a concrete example of what I mean, because I know I'm talking kind of vague, like using your Inhumans example, right? My answer to that would be, okay, also play A-Force, and you first pick Medusa. And then your opponent will decide if you play A-Force or Inhumans. Mm-hmm. But if your opponent decides, I don't want to see She-Hulk, then you get to play with all your Inhumans. Congratulations. Okay. That's how that affiliation works in this format. It's different, right? Sometimes you'll get to use it, sometimes you won't, right? And by picking Medusa first, you might get 3 great A-Force or 3 great Inhumans, and your opponent will decide which of those they want to play against. That's what I mean. It's a different format, so it works differently. But yeah, basically, one of the things that keeps coming up is I do this exact thing in Standard, and I can't do this exact thing, right. So I don't like the format. But it's a different format. You play the game in a different way.
That's
go ahead,
that's a
Morgan.
great point. Yeah, sorry, that's a great point by Pat. And again, it comes down to, I think, the subjective player in that, hey, am I a player that only wants to play single affiliation Inhumans? I just love Inhumans and that's all I want to play. And I hate this format because I can't do it. Yeah, got it. It's probably not the best for you. Or, hey, do I only want to play Black Order? Because that's where I think I can get the best competitive advantage and just crush and destroy. Then, hey, this is probably not the format for you as well.
Right.
So it's a different format and requires a different way of playing. And then I think Pat articulated it beautifully in the Inhumans and A-Force piece, and that's the format, and that's the efficiencies and synergies that I think players need to find and adopt, and it won't be for everyone.
Nathan, let me give you the last word, and I'm going to then go into the phase where I ask each group to make their case for Season 5. So did you have a point you wanted to make?
Yeah, apparently I have not been making my point very well this whole last hour, because that's the entire point I've been trying to make, and you just, in 5 seconds, had Morgan and Pat agree with you. So I don't know. The point I've been trying to make is you have affiliations that are borderline unplayable, like Inhumans, like Black Order. So the rosters are going to look the same because Morgan and Pat, as very competitive players, are not going to be taking those, as am I, or as in Sploosh. I mean, look, the limited data, the invitational, we can look at the numbers and it shows that. So, I mean, I completely agree with what you just said, Norbert. I mean, the second part of this is, or do you think there's more people out there that Standard doesn't really have, it has its flaws to it. There's going to be no perfect game play. We're gamers. We're always going to find problems with whatever format is put on the table. There's no doubt that we'll find holes into it. But with Standard, you can do most of anything you want. You can play single affiliation Inhumans. You can play dual affiliation if you want. Yes, you're limited on tactics cards, so it hurts you a little bit there, but you can play the characters that you want. I think the bottom line is in Battle Realms, technically you can if you're trying to be competitive. If you're trying to be casual, I mean, and Pat is making a lot of faces, but I mean, you brought the same roster we all brought in the Invitational. So
I just took my normal roster. I don't know why you guys didn't.
So
all right,
everyone just did the same thing too.
All right.
I mean, I did not talk to one person about the roster in the Invitational. I can say that. I can, some people might say, oh, they probably talked about it. I didn't talk to one person. I just inputted my roster, and it ended up being the exact same as everybody else's.
It's conclusion. It's collusion for sure.
Norbert.
Yes, sir.
No one answered my question about if the pick ban is a skill, and acknowledging that there is a percentage of plus or minus going on in a game right as soon as the game starts. Like, I don't want to hear that nobody gets the perfect roster, and it's going to be someone gets some percentage less than they want, and someone might get a lesser percent that they want. And obviously, Sooner did mention that some people are going to be really sad and get we're going to hit like a 40% roster. I mean, unfortunately, we're going to have people right out the gate just having some real bad times. But in competitively, even if we're talking 5%, in Magic the Gathering, if a deck is like 5 or 10% better than another deck, that makes it like the best deck in the game. So if you're giving me, based on band pick, just even 5% difference than you, I'm already pretty upset about it competitively.
Yeah. So Pat,
I just want to say real quick, I do, and it'll to 5 seconds. I do think there's no doubt pick and ban is a skill of the game.
Yeah. So what do you say, Pat and Morgan? And I want to point out, having played at format now, I'd like you to address the fact not only is it a matter of banning the right characters in your opponent's thing, I found that screwing with their ability to get a certain points value for the threat level that's going to in play is actually as much a part of it as is removing characters that you don't want to see or that are particularly strong. So how do you respond to that? I mean, is this then part of the game now?
Yeah, so to answer the question, I absolutely agree it's a skill. I mean, it has to be, right? Because if it's not a skill, then everyone does it exactly the same, or it's random, and neither of those is true. It is a skill. One of the things that I dislike about the format is the fact that that skill is so different from how we normally play the game and how differently play standard, and that in fact it comes in your face at the start, because I think it's intimidating for people. It creates a barrier for entry, and I don't love that. I think it's basically taking the turn zero of the game, right? The roster construction and squad selection, and putting it in your face at the start in a different format. And I mean, yeah, you can definitely come out ahead or behind of it based on your composition and your skill, in the same way that if I have a top tier competitive team and you have 10 unaffiliated characters, they're very far apart, right? I think you could argue that standard, the difference is narrower. I don't know if that's necessarily true, right? But that's what we're talking about, right? Is if you have a very tuned standard team with the perfect crisis cards, the perfect tactics cards, the perfect 10 characters for every threat level, versus someone who doesn't, you have a big advantage. And that's what you see in Battle Realm, but it's in your face in a pick ban format beforehand.
Yeah. Morgan?
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of what Pat said. I mean, you've got to have the knowledge about the game and the characters. Skill is to execute that knowledge in the recruit and dismiss phase.
All right, look, I want to leave some time for people to ask some questions who are on the chat. I also have a few here written here. But what I'd like to do now in a priority order, back and forth, I want each of the panelists to make their case for Season 5, one way or the other. And I would like to consider, because what I've been hearing tonight is if you wanted to be charitable about these two different formats, you could say that they're both bringing a different challenge to the game, and therefore neither one is better than the other. It's just a different way to play. I've been hearing that as a bit of an undertone. So should we be playing Season 5 in some sort of hybrid format? Perhaps all the Swiss rounds in one format and then the elimination rounds in another, or maybe half the normal season in one format and then the other. So I'm going to call on you. Make your case for what you feel Season 5 should be and why, succinctly if you can, but consider the hybrid aspect of it as a possibility. And so we'll start with Nathan.
I don't think so. I think whichever way you go, and I've said a lot of bad things about Battle Realm, and I also said I like Battle Realm and I have fun playing it, and I do think there are some good things about it. So, me personally, I'd play in either of them. I don't think you should change mid-season. I think you need to be consistent. If I make Top Cut playing it one way, I would like to play that way in the Top Cut personally. And that's just a personal opinion.
You don't think it'd be a stronger challenge to you or to everyone to see who can actually master both formats by the end of it?
Well, then why play then why don't you make two separate tournaments? Then why play the standard format for 6 rounds, and then, because I'm not playing Morgan. I am in US. I don't play Morgan and I don't play Pat in the standard version. So no, I don't feel like it's. Let's say I make Top Cut. I don't feel like I won anything.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't beat everybody. You only win if you win the whole thing, in my opinion. As the great Ricky Bobby said, if you're not first, you're last. So. There's no point, in my opinion, and that's just my personal opinion. I'd like it to be all one way, whether it's all Battle Realm is fine, or if it's all standard is fine. The other point I want to make is I think you have to think of the 168 players that are playing in this tournament. And I think you have to decide, do you want to make this league a serious top-level competitive league, or do you want to do what's best for 168 people? In my humble opinion, I think Battle Realm is not what's best as it is right now for 168 people. And I'll just leave it at that.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, because we've been criticized, the organizers that is, about how we've been running the league in a constructive way, nothing nasty, but nonetheless criticized because it isn't quite perfect and everything. But I think people do indeed forget that we are actually trying to balance this these seasons to be for as many people as possible. So we're trying to have some aspect of it for the super competitive people, but it is also a large bulk of people playing it for fun, especially as being a new game. And so we are constantly having that as a balance that we're trying to strive for. If you're in the UK, though, I invite you in September to come down to our 3-day convention, where we're going to have loads of activity for both organized competitive players and casual players, where we don't have to mix the two, and so then you could see everything in its purest form. But that's neither here nor there. Morgan, go ahead and make your case for season 5.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going. You caught me off guard. No worries.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
No,
So, look,
in Marvel Crisis Protocol, you go from one character to another. There's no husband and wife card being played here, my friend.
So, firstly, I think this has been a really good discussion to illuminate some points for the good points and also the negative points for Battle Realm. But really, to answer the crux of the question, should Battle Realm be for Season 5? My answer is no. And I think that's mainly because the character and leader pools amongst the affiliations, I think, are quite uneven at the moment. And I'll go back to my earlier comment of decoupling the mechanics of the format to what's currently released right now. I would like to see this discussion revisited in the future when we have, far more characters and affiliations and dual leaders there, so players have more options. But at the moment, I think it's just not big enough yet. In terms of the aspect of changing between standard and battle realms potentially for the cut, look, I'd be happy with either, but I think it should be no. I think you should play the one format throughout. And I say that because mainly, and this is a purely a personal opinion, I really enjoy the journey I take my roster on in the seasons. Each of the seasons I've largely played a different roster. And I feel like when I get it at the start of the season, I'm just learning it and trying how to play it. And I refine it. We have the mid-season roster changes and we have the top cut changes. And you're constantly evolving your roster. And you're taking it on a journey. And then I'd hate to see you finish the Swiss, then all of a sudden you have a brand new thing that you don't really know what you're doing and you have no real emotional attachment to your little characters. Mm-hmm. And that's just personal. So I think you just play the same format throughout. And there's also some competitive aspects to that as well. But sort of finally, and the biggest one for me is, despite those things, I think there's been enough negative opinions. And look, it could be from a vocal minority, and that's fine. But there's enough negative around the format that indicates that people have played it and don't like it, or they haven't played it and don't like it. It doesn't really matter. They don't like it. Whereas we're not hearing that about standard format. Maybe the people who don't enjoy standard just stop playing the game and then quietly slip away, and we don't hear about it. Whereas for this format, there's a lot of negative around it. And for you guys running the league, we need to cater for, it's trying to be all things to all people, which is a real challenge that you've set yourselves. So I wish you luck in that. But for those reasons, there's nothing wrong with standard. AMG balanced the game, and if there's some balance issues with standard, I'm confident they'll address them in due course. And Battle Realms is not the panacea or to fix all those things. So I'm happy with standard for Season 5, and I don't think we should mix and match formats.
Right. Great. Well stated, Morgan. Thank you. All right, Douglas, you're up.
So I'll say that I agree that losing in the cut, that hits me hard. I don't, getting to the cut is cool, but losing in it, that's what matters to probably everyone talking here today. And to me, honestly, I see the season starting when the cut starts. And I partially joke about that, but that is kind of the way the league was designed, is to mix casual and competitive together.
Yeah. And
us competitive people, we get our focus when the cut hits, and to lose that opportunity would be unfortunate. I'll say that I've had people message me because I've become sort of a accidental head of this whole negative thing, and people who've made cut before have messaged me and said I would drop from the cut if this was changed, and take that for what you will. I think I might too. If I spent my entire time playing Black Order or any other affiliated that's mediocre in Battle Realms and finally made the cut, I would be pretty annoyed and upset if I couldn't realistically play that roster into the next format. And I just will say, as a conclusion on that, is that all of us, I imagine, are part of other communities. I came from other communities. I'm in many Discords. And after the article by Jacob, which I did not share to anyone. I was getting messages from like Legion players and other players X-Wing, like, what the heck's going on with Marvel? What your meta's broken? They're like, what the hell? Like, this is awful. And they're asking me, when did the game break? And I was like, hold on, slow down. This is just some crazy format we're trying out, and it's not the end of the world. And this isn't how the game is being played right now. Trust me, the game's very diverse. Calm down. But I mean, I'm sorry, but like, I don't know about you guys, but I know for a fact, I'm going to say this with 100% conviction, that the Tabletop Simulator mod has made a lot of money for AMG. I've bought like everything, and I originally didn't. And if this Battlegrounds format is creating negative publicity, and if people want to admit to it or not, this format could hurt the game, because I think that at the highest level, it will get very polarizing, and whether people like it, the bans, what characters are playable, what affiliations are playable, it all comes down, and I think it would be bad for the game. So
Yeah.
I would like to think there's a better format we could create, maybe as a community, maybe if we got AMG's attention. I think asking, why is it designed this way? What were you trying to do? What, maybe we could help them get there instead. But we can't be in their heads. I don't know why they designed it the way they did, but this is the result of what they did.
Yeah.
So
you alluded to something that I want to be very, very clear about for the audience, which is that we're talking about, what is the choice for us in an organized play, quite large global audience to use. These formats, and Nathan has said this, these formats are fun on their own. If you enjoy playing them in your shop, don't feel bad about playing Battle Realm if that's at all what the impression you're getting. Go for it, have that great time, and what have you. It's just that when we're looking at something in an organized fashion, something like you want to play in a more higher competitive situation, this is that's the environment that we're kind of having discussion around. So Battle Realm's still okay. Don't feel bad if you want to play it. Pat, go ahead then. What is your case for season 5?
So the point that I agree with the most is the one that Suna raised and Norbert you reiterated, which is the whole point of the TTS seasons is they're trying to appeal to as many people as possible. Right? They're trying to just create organized play while we're in the pandemic that everyone can enjoy. I think to that end, and following this discussion, to me, it seems pretty clear that standard format is the only way to go in regards to getting as many people engaged as possible in as simple and as effective way as possible. That said, I do think that other formats, including but not limited to Battle Realm, are really interesting to explore in different ways. I really like the approach of doing mini leagues, of doing one-day events, even things like the Invitational Tournament. I think it's great to put more formats out there and get people's take on them, right? See what the community enjoys. And I think if there's an upswell where people start to love a particular format like Battle Realm, right, you'll hear it and you'll know it's the right time to switch the TTS League to the point where the majority of the community will enjoy that more. I think we're clearly very, very far away from that. Speaking completely personally and selfishly, I would enjoy playing Battle Realm, especially in the top cut, where I think you eliminate some of the problems of it being too high a barrier to entry and being too difficult as like a format for every person, right? If it's in the top cut. But I also totally get that maybe you don't want to have the top cut be a different format. That seems kind of weird. So I don't see why we necessarily would go down that path either. I think what I would like to see is just the continuation of promoting this and other formats in one-day events and mini leagues, and seeing how the community develops over time and which formats rise to the top.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like I said, we're doing this convention, this 3-day convention in London in September, and I'm really looking forward to having lots of different types of formats there so that people can try it out. And I know a lot of people tried it out in this little mini league and maybe had fun. We had the one-day tournament, and maybe that's sufficient. It's a nice palate cleanser, so to speak. So we'll have to see. I think that's going to bring us to a close. We don't have any questions on the chat. I'll checked once more to see if anything come through, but it doesn't look like it. I think we had a very, very broad discussion, which is perfect, and I appreciate how nicely you tried to look at it from everybody's point of view, regardless of which side you're on. And so I thank you, all the panelists, for their time and consideration in getting this together, and also devoting some of their hobby time, essentially, to the community this way. So for everybody who's watching, we hope that this was helpful. We encourage you to play a few Battle Realm games. The start of Season 5 has been delayed by a few weeks because of the shipping issues that have been happening all around the globe, so there is a bit of time to play some of these games. And we will be doing one more survey ahead of Season 5 to make the final choice. And that survey is open to anybody, whether you've played in the mini leagues or not. So please do vote in that if you're interested in expressing your opinion about how you'd like to play the game. And so I wish you all a good day, good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be.